All right, so we're going to get started. So thanks everyone for joining today. We know it's Friday and you're all busy wrapping things up ahead of the weekend, I'm sure. So really appreciate you joining. My name is Jonathan Bareby. I'm a senior account manager focused on ABM at SEO My Business. And I have with me Jason McDaniel, who's our senior ad ops manager. So today, as part of our ABM series, we're going to be focusing on creating engaging assets for ABM. This is quite the topic, and we could likely spend all afternoon discussing it. So what we've tried to do today is really condense our material down to the key points that are critical when developing assets. So this should take us about 15 minutes or so, I'd say max, to cover the material today. And we'll leave some time as well for questions. So looking at the agenda, we're going to start things off by going over the 5 W's as they apply to asset strategy. So this, of course, is in reference to the who, what, when, where, why questions that I'm sure you're familiar with, but we've made kind of a slight tweak. And then from there, we'll get into account scoring, which is all about understanding performance, the funnel, and the effectiveness of your assets. So getting into the 5 W's, the tweak here being that we bump the why up towards the front when thinking specifically about the process, developing your asset strategy and the roadmap. So I'm going to pass things on to Jason, who's going to explain a bit around why and the rest of the process.
Sure, thanks, Jonathan. So like you mentioned, we've kind of flipped this whole thing on its head and started with the why, because we think that the first and most important thing to consider is why you're actually running the ABM campaign. Starting off with high quality assets is really great, but it's only half the battle. You need to be smart about which assets you're using and why you're using them. You can't just throw a bunch of assets at a wall and try to see what sticks. And if you end up doing that, you're just gonna fail and you're gonna waste ad spend. When developing the assets, one thing you definitely need to consider is that, one, the assets need to be relevant to the consumer, but also they need to solve an industry problem, which that leads us into who. A lot of companies focus from the beginning on just the accounts and the logos that they want to target. But what they really fail to consider is that they need to tailor the individual assets to a person or a title, the actual person reading the piece of content. So the example we like to use is that a CFO is going to resonate with a different piece of content than a marketing director. But that doesn't mean that the marketing director is less important in the buying committee, and they don't need to be considered as well.
So Jason spoke about the buying committee there, and just to reiterate, from the data we've seen, it tells us that buying committees can typically be made up as many of 6 to 7 folks. So that's something to also be keeping in mind. You're usually not dealing with a situation where there's only maybe 1 or 2 people that are making that purchase decision.
So that kind of leads us into the what, and the what is simply just the assets that you're going to be using. So we found that there are a couple of different formats that we think are most effective. And those are webinars, podcasts, ebooks, case studies, buyer's guides, and white papers. So the general idea of ABM is that you're not just delivering one asset to a person or an account. What you're instead doing is you're serving them something that's easily consumed in the beginning, before then moving on to something that's a little bit more targeted and dense and specific with its content. So an example of that's going to be, you can start by delivering a person with an ebook, which sets up a specific industry problem. And then later you can move into a case study that shows how you tackled that specific problem outlined in the ebook. So our example, and these are our own assets, we have an ebook that sets up the idea that 85% of marketers probably feel uncertain about their ABM efforts. And then we follow that up with a case study, which outlines the different tactics and methods that we've done to bridge that gap in terms of both visibility and targeting, and then finding tangible results in that campaign.
All right, so that brings us to where, which pertains to the specific channels. So we're talking about both paid and organic channels here that your content is going to be serving on. So channels can give you valuable insight into the potential customers that you are reaching when it comes to where they are in the purchase funnel, as well as many other unique insights depending on the channel that you're working with. Jason, do you want to give a few examples of what that looks like?
Yeah, sure. So I think that each channel offers something unique in the chain in terms of the additional insight it provides. So emails, they're gonna give you a window into open rates on different subject lines, so that allows you to really determine what sort of copy an individual account is resonating with. Additionally, you can check out CTAs in that email body and see like what sort of CTAs perform best. Paid social is interesting because its demographic reporting is unparalleled, and it also allows you to see if there's any engagement that account may be having with any other topics on your social networks. Paid search is super interesting because what it does is allows you to see a window from an intent base from the individual search query, which it shows how that contact is thinking from their actual question that they put into a search engine. And from there, it allows you to really understand what's important to them, what's valuable, what they're exactly looking for. And then finally, we move into programmatic, which I think is the most interesting one. What programmatic shows is it shows an outline of the display campaign performance over time. So how different titles and accounts have interacted with your display ads, and it can really give a full picture and tell a story as to what the marketing influence was on a specific account towards a specific title. So then finally, we're going to move into the win. So the question I ask myself here is, when in the sales funnel does a specific asset align? And we've kind of touched on that in previous slides, talking about how you first want to target with something that's less dense, like an ebook, which is setting a product, before moving into something that's more specific, problem oriented, like a webinar, a podcast, or a buyer's guide. The general idea of this win sales funnel position is that as an account is moving down the sales funnel, you're delivering more and more tailored content until finally they reach that evaluation phase and there's a manual sales outreach.
All right, so now we're going to get into account scoring, which in short is all about having an accurate understanding of the effectiveness of your ABM strategy and the effectiveness of your assets in order to just be able to manage your strategy and pivot your strategy depending on what you're saying.
So for our account scoring, we have 4 key buckets. These are the pillars that we score by. So that's going to be campaign interaction. So that's going to be the account's specific interaction with your marketing tactics, your email, your programmatic, your paid search, any different channels that they may be, clicking on or engaging with. From there, we move into actual page engagement, which is going to be an account's interaction with those highly valuable pages. And since not all pages are created equal, we score them at an ad hoc basis. So, for example, a product page may be more valuable than, say, just the homepage. From there, we move into conversion interaction. That's going to be the account's interaction with different conversion points on your website. So, form fills, demo requests, RFP submits, etc. Until finally we move into what's probably the most interesting pillar, which is the offsite scoring. What offsite scoring is going to allow us to do is look at the greater internet as opposed to just what's happening on your website, and see accounts that are interacting with specific topics that pertain and relate to your product or service. And what that will allow us to do is have a bigger list of different companies and accounts to market towards. From there, it's all about what we do with this information. We combine all of those scores to spit out a funnel stage that we estimate an account could be in. And from there, we use that account stage per account to target accordingly with different assets. But additionally, we use it to inform sales. So if sales is, if an account has bubbled up to the point where it reaches evaluation stage, we are able to provide sales with every single interaction point that account has taken along the way. So that can help inform the conversation that they're having with that particular prospect. So that's invaluable. And finally, it allows sales and marketing to be friends again.
All right, so that actually brings us to the end of our content. So to kind of wrap things up in a couple big points here, assets are, essentially necessary with any ABM strategy. The key is actually being able to develop effective assets. And to do that requires, a methodical approach to your ABM strategy and doing the research to understand the customer that you're going after. And then from there, account scoring and reporting is simply necessary if you want to ensure that you have an accurate read on the effectiveness of your campaigns as well as your assets. So thanks everyone again for joining. We really appreciate it, and we hope you got something out of the presentation. Wanted to make sure we had a few minutes here for any questions you may have. Okay. All right. Well, thanks so much, everyone. I hope you all have a good weekend. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.